Hi everyone, salam sejahtera, selamat datang and welcome to program Jom Sembang Air or Let's Talk Water. Selamat berbuka kepada those who have just broke their fast, and some good news, some bad news. Good news, we have we have panelists from JAS as well as Dr. Zaki, who of course everyone knows him. And the bad news is now we're going to go for another PKP. Unfortunately for the next 2 weeks, so I guess whether we like it or we don't like it, time for us to respect, abide and stay safe. So with that, let's go straight into the program. So program Jom Sembang Air dibawa oleh Forum Air Malaysia bersama FOMCA and WeCam. So please do check their Facebook page and their website, get to know what are the activities they are doing. You may want to participate or join in some of their program. And this particular program is themed around water disruption. There are a total of 3 series, 9 panel discussion, and we have started the second series, Back to Basic, on the 20th of April, where we talked about understanding water cycle. And for the today's program, we are talking about deterioration of water resources, di mana there's plenty of conversation going on how the sumber air makin lama quality dia makin merosot. So today we'll be talking about this particular conversation. We are going on Zoom as well as we are going live on Facebook. So please do share, tag your friends, get them to participate. If you have any questions, you can post either on Facebook or in the Zoom chat here. So thank you very much. And today our panelist, Dr. Zaki. Okay, Dr. Zaki have joined us on the 20th as well. Dr. Zaki is actually a very well-known figure when it comes to water resources, especially water resources. He is a go-to figure when people have questions, especially when there is an incident that goes on or there is a debate between, let's say, state and federal policymakers and bosses. Go-to person where people will ask questions. So you have familiarized with Dr. Zaki, and another one today, we are very lucky to have Miss Norina. Thank you very much for joining us. And Miss Norina is actually from Jabatan Alam Sekitar. So it's really a great pleasure to have Miss Norina, because who else we should hear from if not to the police, the environmental police of these countries. So today is an opportunity for you to get to know what Jabatan Alam Sekitar actually does, the Department of Environment actually does, because a lot of time what we hear is not the full picture, it's not the full story, how much they are involved and the things they're doing. So we do hope we can hear a lot from Ms. Norina today. So without wasting any time, Dr. Zaki, my first question to you. To set our discussion today, what is the story of our water resources? Is it getting better or is it getting worse? Or we are actually fine?
Okay, I think well, it is, if you talk about in terms of quality, I think it's a known fact that the water quality is deteriorating over time. So your question is how is it, So it's that implies, how has it been going on, what's the status over the past over time. So I can usually, when I talk about water quality status of the country, the go-to report is the report published by the DOE, the Environmental Quality Report. So usually when we talk about water quality status, the reporting is in terms of the WQI, the Water Quality Index. So, I mean, if you look at the Water Quality Index, there has been this very steady decline in water quality in river status, whereby there are 3 classifications of the WQI. You have the clean, slightly polluted, and polluted status. So you can see that rivers which are classified as clean are decreasing over time, going into either becoming slightly polluted or not. So that's in terms of reporting. That's what's done by the authority. So if you look at the numbers, so the numbers only tell you that. But even beyond that, if you go beyond the numbers, we've begun to experience more and more frequent disruptions in recent years compared to, 15, 20 years ago. So that itself is also an indicator. That itself is an indicator of the state of things in the country. So yes, to answer your question, there is there's a deterioration in water quality over the years. And I remember one time, maybe Norina can share further. There was even one time in one of the parameters, people in this field, we measure BOD, right? I remember one of the years, out of all the stations that were monitored by DOE, not a single station BOD was class 1. Out of the 1,000 over stations the DOE monitored. I remember there was 1 year for Norina, 1 year, yeah, not even one station registered a class 1 for BOD. So that tells you the state of things in the country.
Okay, but just wondering, right? Because now you have to the report is the report or the numbers is like lab results, kan? So doctors always gonna diagnose kepada patients. So right now we are the patients, the citizens. So if you diagnose the report, what you're saying? Are you saying that things are even? Are you? What I'm trying to understand here, what I'm getting from you is, things are not that fantastic, but it's not as bad as how it's being portrayed in the media. Is that what you're saying? Did I understand you correct?
Mm, wow. There are many ways of looking at it, actually. If you look at in terms of intensity of river pollution back in the 70s, let's just back in the 70s when the EQA, the Environmental Quality Act, was still in its efficiency, certain river systems at that time were severely polluted because of lack of environmental legislation at that time. However, the numbers are not as many as today. After the EQA came into being in the 70s, there was an improvement in water quality. However, now the numbers in terms of rivers which are more polluted because of more widespread development, maybe the intensity is not as prevalent back in the 70s, but in terms of number of rivers which are slightly polluted, and definitely the numbers are a lot more today.
Okay. So, Miss Norina, so from your perspective, right? One thing I noticed is normally 365 days, it's not that 365 days there's an incident, but likely we only remember Jabatan Alam Sekitar when there is a breach. So I guess today I want to take an opportunity to thank Jabatan Alam Sekitar, because there are many days in the country we are living without an incident. Now back to this conversation about water deterioration, Kemerosotan, sumber air, quality sumber air, right? So I'm wondering, from your perspective or the department perspective, are the conditions of our river reversible? Can we reverse it back from that class 4 or class 5 to a better quality level of or quality standard of that river? If so, how you think that can be done, if that is even possible?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say thank you because inviting the departments of environment. So I'm the represents departments who participate in this forum. Yeah. All right. Back to the question just now. Before I go, I think sometimes we say whether it's reversible or irreversible. So usually, if we look into the religion perspective, right? I think Dr. Zaki also, as a Muslim, they also believe that God created the earth and all the living things, and God also created humans to actually look after to safeguard our environment. Everything's inside it. So human is responsibility to obey and accountable to what they're responsible by given by God. So I believe what God creates is perfect, you know. It's actually, if what Dr. Zaki mentioned just now, in the 70s, even those the legislations is not there, perundangan belum ada banyak lagi, but our river also have been deteriorated at that time. However, upon now, I think some of it is actually better than before. So that shows that river actually, whether it's merosot ataupun tidak, it can be reversible, but a lot of effort has to be put in lah. Because we can see that at the moment kita nampak kita punya pembangunan is to how to dance, okay, and then river dia tu ada carrying capacity itself, right? So because as I heard about the other forum that mentions that water quantity cannot be changed, right? Cannot be changed, but the quality can be changed, right? So at this time kita nampak is like Kemerosotan, most of the river is because punca-punca pencemar ni terlalu banyak already. No matter how legislations, how much stringent penguatkuasaan, but it's only based on the points, at the points only. But we forgot about how river manage it. Okay, so kita kena lihat balik lah how to actually to reduce the input into the river. Itu yang penting, because if we stringent in terms of law, in terms of perundangan, peraturan berkenaan dengan how much can be masuk, the standard, I'm talking about the standard. But if accumulative impact, the river will not able to actually reverse back, because the input keep on coming in, dia tak sempat lagi rest. Like manusia jugalah kan, kalau kita keep on working without stop, without resting, we will be cepat lah, macam our health will be deteriorating. So similarly to the environment lah. So that is why I think what we can do now is actually to look into what is the carrying capacity of the river. That is the most important thing that what we should do now, because we cannot actually tackle from the source. We have to really look into what the river the carrying capacity of the river now. That's what we are actually look into. You know, we have this have satu kajian berkenaan dengan we call that total TMDL, total load, maximum daily load. Okay, so berapa river tu can actually receive that daily load to berapa the burden. Alright, so that dia tidak akan macam, at least dia can have actually over the time, dia akan actually process naturally, it can slowly, it can be reversible. But if that is not able, we're not able to do that, then continually the river receiving the input, of course, it will continue to be deteriorating. So that is the effort that we should do lah. Actually to look into that, and of course people will look at what DOE doing kan. Selalunya kalau river, pencemaran river, people will cakap pasal DOE will be terkenal lah pada masa tu. Lain-lain hari dia tak terkenal, tapi bila pencemaran berlaku DOE is terkenal lah. So kita nampak ya, kita nampak DOE, tapi kita tak tahu bahawa setiap what we do is based on apa yang kita diberi kuasa. It is tak semua punca itu adalah di bawah kawalan DOE. So we should know ada agensi lain yang actually is in the jurisdiction of which is not DOE. So banyak input lah daripada point sources, daripada non-point sources. Tapi banyak yang point sources we can able to cater, tapi non-point sources tu dekat mana non-point sources tu. So itu yang a big challenge lah for non-point sources. Yeah, I think I stop here first. I'll give back to you, Ms. Punita.
Thank you, Ms. Narina. Actually, I like the part when you because when you explained it doesn't give all doom and gloom. So that is the I guess a positive news for everyone, because it's like your focus was, you're talking about what is being input into the river. That means that if that input is actually get reduced, then I guess we still have a saving clause. And I quite like the fact that you bring the religious context into this, because I watched I was watching a documentary in Indonesia, and then one of these guys, one of the locals, the community leaders on the ground, actually made a statement: manusia adalah khalifah alam. So I thought that was really a beautiful way of putting it, because eventually it is humans and human related activities that is causing the damage, right? So talking about total maximum daily load, that is actually one of the key conversations that we are been hearing, and we also have heard a lot about it. So I really would like to hear if Dr. Zaki can give us in a way that everyone can understand what do you mean by total maximum daily load, how it's going to work, because right now we are not on that approach. Maybe you can explain a little bit on what is the method right now to determine standard, and then probably like the approach or the vision we have moving towards total maximum daily loads. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, it's like this. Taking further from what Norina said on carrying capacity of the river, it's like this basically. Right now we have certain pollution sources that is allowed to be released into the river. Okay, so these are, as per what Norina mentioned just now, these are sources that's covered in the DQA point sources, specifically point sources lah. So you have sewage, industrial effluent, what you call these landfills and whatnot. So, but prior to being released into the river, these kind of pollution sources, they need to undergo treatment. Okay, before they are allowed to release, they need to undergo treatment. They need to meet limits in law. They need to meet limits in the law before they are allowed to release into the river. Okay, so that is how the current, in a very simple sense, how the current makeup of the law is at the moment. So we have our affluent regulations. Just to be very clear, our affluent regulations. That means that the regulation that deals with point sources, release of pollutant that goes into the river. So so that is that legislation, one part of the legislation. And then on the other hand, you have the national water quality standards, the standards of the water quality of the river and how we benchmark the water quality of the river. So that one, we have five classes, 5 category classes: class 1, class 2A, class 2B, class 3, class 4, class 5. Okay, so that is basically saying that the state of the river, whether it's a good water quality is good, whether it's bad and whatnot. So essentially, class 1 water quality is supposed to be the best water quality, and class 5 water quality is supposed to be the worst water quality lah, in essence, in a nutshell lah. So you have the effluent regulation, what is allowed to be released into the river, and you have the water quality standard that benchmarks the water quality of the river. Okay, so very clear on that. Now, the issue is if you compare, which you're not supposed to compare, but if you compare the effluent regulations and the national water quality standards, let's just zoom into one parameter. Let's just say we zoom in into ammonia as a parameter, as a water quality, as a pollutant. The effluent regulation says that for, let's say, industrial effluent, the maximum permissible level of ammonia, or the most stringent level of ammonia that can be released into the river is 10 milligrams per liter. Okay, don't worry about the unit, just 10 milligrams per liter. Okay, 10 milligrams per liter, that's at standard A as per the effluent regulations. Now, if you were to compare that 10, the effluent was going into the river, compared to what's in the national standards, that 10 milligrams per liter actually is beyond class 5. It's actually beyond class 5. It's actually beyond class 5. Meaning it's in a river sense, it's very high lah. So why is this the case? This is the case because the regulations were drafted in such a way that it still counts on what Norina mentioned just now, the carrying capacity of the river, such as the dilution of the river. Dilution is a component of carrying capacity. That means you're essentially hoping that the river can take in the 10 milligrams per liter. Hopefully it can dilute that 10 milligrams per liter to a lower level. maybe 10 times dilution, 50 times dilution, so that the level reduces significantly. So yeah, okay, that's fine. And many developing countries practice this kind of approach actually. But the issue with that is the example I gave you just now is only one source, 10 milligram filter coming from one source. What if you have 10 sources, 50 sources, 100 sources releasing at 10 milligram per liter? That may cause a problem for the river because the river may not be able to dilute. Or similarly, in another, looking at it from another angle, what even if you have 10 sources, but the river is small? It's not a big river. It's a somewhat kecil sungai, small. It may not be able to dilute. So this is the problem with the way how the current legislation is drafted. Now, TMDL stands for total maximum daily load. Total maximum daily load. It is actually a concept mooted by the US Environmental Protection Agency that is supposed to deal with this discrepancy. That means you're not just looking in terms of the concentration I mentioned just now of the individual sources, but rather the whole picture. That's why the T stands for total. Total, the bigger picture. We say total, talking about all the pollution sources within the river basin. So that is the concept of TMDL. But I have to clarify here. TMDL is actually not a lot of people, because as you mentioned, Ms. Punita, the term TMDL have been thrown around a lot, but a lot of people also get confused. TMDL is actually not a technical term per se. You'll be surprised. It's actually a legal term. It's a legal term stated in the Clean Water Act in the US. So actually, it's a legal term that controls the total loading. So meaning to say, TMDL is a specific program in the US under the Clean Water Act in the US. So that doesn't mean that total loading control is not applied in other countries. It's just that they don't use the term TMDL. If you go to Japan, you go to Korea, they also look at loading control. So that's basically in a nutshell. I can go on and on, but that's basically in a nutshell.
Maybe like if the analogy would be every individual have freedom of speech, but when you live in a community, you have to make sure your freedom of speech doesn't harm the community. Right? That's an analogy.
That's a good analogy.
Yes. So quickly, there's a couple of questions we have here on the Facebook side. So I will just raise it up. First, Encik Ismail, for water quality matters, the very first reason to know about its catchment area. Every other factor is secondary. So I guess that is a fair point, right? That's a fair point. And nobody going to dispute that. For forest land use, can BOD be achieved at class 1 and class 2? So
Yes.
It's possible. Okay, you have an answer there, Judy. Judy asked this question.
Yes.
Mr. Subra from Kajang, encroachment into forests and river reserves will lead into pollution sources, which would be very difficult to control and monitor. Yes, I guess it's very rare, but like as what Ms. Norina just said, it is still possible to reverse this impact on the river, but it requires extreme will from all parties involved to
and time as well.
Yes,
time as well. Yes, because it's need time to get rest.
Yes, so I guess there are. I mean, also I think depending on what Dr. Zaki have mentioned, the capability of that river, whether the river is big or small, and then the general health condition of that river will determine that factor. Question, Ismail, another question. When we will secure the catchment areas, it's the source of clean water, and it is the source of clean water, and it's tied up with respecting the natural habitats of plants, animal, as well as orang asli. Conservation of our natural resources must be given priority, urgently. So, anyone like to take that? When we will secure the catchment areas, is it even possible? I think one thing, we do not have a state rep here, but never mind.
Yes, that's what I was about to say. Because it's a stat matter. So
yes,
we leave the stat.
Yes. Okay. If Dr. Zaki would like to write on. Yes.
Actually, this goes back to thank you, Mr. Ismail. Is it? Actually,
Yes.
he hit the nail on the head. Actually, I mentioned this in our last discussion, in our previous discussion. Remember,
Yes.
I told you, constitutionally, water is a state matter.
Yeah.
So, if you talk about catchment protection and catchment preservation as a directive, if you ask me, most effective, that directive would be most effective if it comes from the state. If it comes from the state. Uh, and I would say, let's consider the alternative. Let's just say such a directive came from the federal. Everybody will not listen because it comes from the federal. Federal doesn't have the jurisdiction, you see. So that's why I say it's more effective for it to come from the state lah. If you that's the way I look at it. The way the current how the current the current makeup is. So that's the way to go lah.
Okay, thank you.
But
Thank you,
of
Dr.
course,
Zaki.
but of course, the federal has to play a role as well, because as I also mentioned last week, sorry, 2 weeks ago, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago, the state has the prowess and the authority, but perhaps what they need support is in terms of resources. I mentioned this last time, in terms of resources and expertise. So this is where the federal can play their role. So they can complement each other in terms of resources and.
But federal, who will that be? Because as from what I see, Jabatan Anus kita, the role is to set certain standards and regulation, and they step in when there's a breach, right? They don't really have much control on how that particular catchment is being used, what kind of development are being allowed. So that don't really come under their control. So who you think should be
So
sort of like saying something about it?
Okay, to me, DOE is already playing the role, because you're looking at in terms of compliance, but don't forget, Puan Norina is from Bahagian Air dan Marine. She monitors the river. She monitors the river. The water quality status of the rivers in the countries come from her division. So the state doesn't have that capability. I mean, they don't have the resources to do that in terms of finding in terms of knowing the status of the water quality of the rivers in the country. And mind you, it's not just in terms of network, but also in terms of technology. As Padona will tell you, we have 30 online stations, right? 30 online river water quality stations.
Continuous stations.
Yes, and 1,400 over manual stations. You know, those online stations, they're not cheap, they're not cheap. So
Yes.
I don't think the state may have the resources to implement such a program. So that's the other aspect of it.
Ms. Norina, I want to write on what Dr. Zaki said. Would like to understand more, what does it mean by you are having online station and manual station? What is that for, and how it's done? So if you can share a little bit on that part of it.
Okay, actually, DOE has been done the program not only on the river, but we have also for the air and also marine. So these three, we called it Program Pengawasan Kualiti Alam Sekitar lah. So EQMP. And on top of this one is actually, we also monitor some of the air tanah. Okay. So since today our topic is on the river, so we do monitoring on the river status, the quality of the water, right? This is because we be given a mandate under the EQA, okay, under Section 3, that we have to produce a report on the quality of environment. That is why we are doing this, right? So about what is station automatic and what is manual, right? As Dr. Zaki mentioned just now, we have 30 continuous station, not automatic, continuous station. So it means that continuous station is actually the equipment is put in the river, and it will give you the data, right? However, for these continuous stations, it's only limited of the parameter can be monitored, not all the parameter. Kalau ikut the standard, we have like about over 30, Dr. Zaki?
Yeah,
Right?
industrial.
But in our stations, for the continuous stations, we only around like 17 parameters that be monitored, but not all are actually related to the pollution, only some. All right, that is the limitations. And 30 continuous station, so it's actually in the about 30 river. So it's not like to monitor the whole Malaysia's river. So only this 30 river, or which when we actually choose which river, is to see which one yang that actually have the water supply banyak dia punya apa dia the water has been used for the water supply. So itu kita punya basis of choosing the river for this 30 station. Of course, if we given more fund, of course, we actually want to do banyak lagi this continuous station, because this can give you almost real data, but it's not, it's real data, but it's not the like real time data, what I mean. Sebab dia diambil like every half an hour punya data. It's not like every minutes, every seconds, or every 15 minutes. Dia every 30 minutes. Setiap 30 minit dia akan take the data. It's a grab sample actually. It akan give you the data for every 30 minutes. So it's almost real-time data. The best that we can do lah. Okay, we also have the menu station. Menu station dia kalau you detect some kinds of abnormality on the data, it's already like maybe 1 month ago. Sebab dia diambil together, and then we have to send it to the lab. They said take us 2 weeks actually to get the data, because it needs to have QA, QC, all this one. So about 2 weeks then kita akan dapat the data lah. So kalau so this station, this type of station we call menu stations, and kita ada about 1353 station. Itu pun berada pada 672 sungai sahaja. 672 sungai. So I think in Malaysia kita lebih banyak daripada itu kan. I think Sarawak alone dah banyak apa tu river, but itu saja yang kita dapat because of the budget, limited budget ya. And then orang selalu petikai kan, dah ada monitor, why is still polluted? Itu selalu kan orang akan kata DOE tidak buat kerja lah, right? Tetapi kita kena faham lah, as I mentioned just now, kita punya real time punya data pun almost real time, bukan the real time. And then dalam 30 sungai sahaja, and the parameter is limited. What if the parameter yang kita tak dapat detect, yang actually yang causing pollutions tu, yang kita tahu is actually it have to be sent to the lab. So itu akan melambatkan kita punya tindakan. So pollution is still happens lah. And then kita punya objektif lebih kepada how to say, when people say how come the culprit cannot be found, cannot be charged. Sebab kita punya data ini lebih kepada ambient. We just indicate, untuk indicate apa status river itu, to determine the health of the river. It's not really to find the culprit, but from this information yang kita ada tadi tu, kita dapat strategize our punya strategy in terms of finding the culprit. But more on in category lah, kita masih lagi go for like, we have to, kalau nak tahu the culprit, kita kena tengok satu persatu lah. Tetapi itu membantu jabatan lah untuk really fokus dekat mana actually yang bermasalah. Okay? So itu amat membantu kita lah. So sebab kita kena faham, kalau orang pun akan bertanya juga, kalau dia kata you cannot find do apa yang sepatutnya, the monitoring is actually to solve the problem. Kenapa masih ada problem pollutions lagi kan? Tetapi kita kena ada some kinds of benchmark lah. Otherwise, if we don't monitor, what do you going to say? Apa status you punya river? Who going to tell you? Tak ada kan? Because itu macam I kena bagi satu like illustrations lah. If you want to know whether you're healthy or not, you go to do check up every 6 months ke 1 year ke kan?
Yes.
Then after you got some kinds of ada masalah, bila dalam check up tu baru you go for detailed check up. Macam itulah macam monitoring tadi. Bila kita dapat tahu information ni kita akan gunakan untuk kita strategizekan kita punya enforcement toward that extent, untuk kita dapat tahu what is actually yang sources yang betul-betul menyumbang kepada kita punya deteriorating of water quality. However, memang ada limitation, ya. Memang ada limitation. Yang pertama saya sebut tadi, 30 station yang almost real time itu hanya di 30 sungai sahaja. So kita tak dapat lagi to get all the others almost real time data. Yang kedua, monitoring river ni kan, dia hanyalah kita kata the validities of the data itu adalah berada di station tersebut. We cannot say okay 1 kilometer away upstream or downstream, is that the same quality? Tak sama kan? Sebab kita apa yang kita kata, okay kita punya station di sini dia hanya boleh membantu kita to actually check on upstream, but not going to be checking what is downstream. So maybe the pollution is downstream, not the upstream. Itu limitation juga. And then another one is that tadi saya mention the parameter yang menyebabkan pollution. Yang mungkin contohnya tadi Dr. Zaki mention about ammonia. Kita tak ada dalam station, kita punya monitoring of the real continuous stations tadi, tak ada that kind of parameter. Kita ada yang lain tapi dia tak boleh relate kepada yang ammonia, because ammonia is causing the odor yang ada henti tugas logi disebabkan oleh odor. Jadi kita tak ada. So there is a limitation lah. It's a challenge yang kita facing, but hopefully in the future mungkin ada benda yang advance lagi yang boleh kita gunakan untuk detect our punya water quality, and it can be used for as a alert on pollutions. But itu sekarang ni at the moment kita katakan lebih kepada pemantauan dari segi the river health. Itu yang kita nak promotekan. Why? And then kita pun actually banyak membantu agensi lain dalam kajian kepada academicians when they do dia punya kajian, they using our data. Itu another good point lah yang kita share the data. Kita juga share the data with the Badan Kawal Selia Air, whoever that want to get our data, they have a long term data. Sebab kita yang ada data sekarang ni yang betul tak Dr. Zaki? Yep. I'm not sure whether ada agency ada that kinds of a lot of data on the quality. Yeah.
That's what I mentioned just now. Actually, that's where they have to play role, because they have the resources. Even with those limitations, diorang paling comprehensive. Imagine kalau kat state, lagi tak kurang. But
it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good kalau state can take that kinds of responsibility to share.
At least in some locations, right? At least in some locations.
At least ada rivers. Yang mana yang kita tak pantau, ada agency ada. So kita can share.
Ada some states yang have their own program. Sarawak, NREB has their own river program, but they are measured dekat the coastal zone. NREB
they do have, but I'm not sure whether they do like dia tak ada konti.
Tak ada manual.
Dia ada manual. So sometimes they based on dia punya tu lah.
Manual.
Yes.
I think so. From what I hear is when come to monitoring or surveillance that currently being done, one key component yang saya nampak masih lagi require a lot of research and development is the technology itself is insufficient to capture what the problem. When it happens, it still takes some time, 2-3 jam, 4 jam. So of course, the other part of it is between state and federal, how further coordination can be done, budget can be shared, so more stations can be put in place. I think one is on the institutional arrangement, another one is technology itself is insufficient. We have a couple of questions, but before we take the question, I just would like to go back kepada Dr. Zaki. Just now you talked about point source and non-point source. Can you describe for the benefit of the listeners, what do you mean by point source pollutions and non-point source pollution? What is it, and who is the biggest pollution contributor yang we have recorded to date? I mean, not a name but a sector.
Okay, dia macam gini. It's like this. Okay, point source pollution, or in bahasa punca tetap atau punca titik, it's called punca tetap atau titik, is a pollution source that is readily identifiable, comes from a source. You can see where it's coming from. Like I mentioned just now, you have discharges from a factory, from a sewage treatment plant, from a landfill. You can see there's liquid coming out, going into the river. There's continuous flow. So that is what we refer to as point source pollution. It's readily identifiable. Non-point source pollution, by definition, is driven, non-point source ataupun pencemaran punca tidak tetap, by definition, is pollution driven by a hydrological event. Hydrological event. Hydrological event ada dua. Satu, when it snows and the snow melts, becomes runoff, that's one hydrological event. Second is hujan. Kat Malaysia kita tak ada snow. So kita ada hujan. Kita ada hujan. So meaning, whatever pollutants that is deposited on the surface, when it rains, the rainwater transports that pollutant to the nearest water course. That is non-point source pollution. So itu definition there we have to be very clear, because even this one pun, for the longest time there was some confusion. Dia kata macam kedai mamak bila kedai mamak ada discharge silage masuk to drain, dia kata itu non-point source. Tak betul lah, itu point source.
Yes.
Itu point source pollution. Ataupun what you call this car wash, cuci kereta dan cuci ada liquid masuk ke dalam longkang, dia panggil non-point. Itu tak betul, itu point source.
Point sources.
Itu point source pollution. That is point source. So non-point source is only pollution driven by a hydrological event. Those kind of sources, actually when people try to say that, what they're trying to say is those sources yang macam silage tadi tu yang masuk to the drain, wash, those are what we refer to as other sources. Sources yang contohnya in Malaysia is not part of the EQA. It's not under the Environmental Quality Act, under DOE punya act. Macam gitu. It's point source but not under the even macam kolam discharge from aquaculture, that's not under the EQA.
Okay. What about that? Means these plantations, that is non-point source, right?
Runoff from plantations, yes.
Plantation non-point source. So because I think one of the conversation we keep on hearing when we're talking about catchment areas ni is about ammonia punya pollutant in the river is very high, and ammonia normally they fertilizer. So tapi when we look at reporting focuses on point source. Is it because non-point source cannot be measured?
Okay, tak. Non-point source can be measured. In fact, it has been measured. Okay, dia macam ni. Okay, this goes to your second question. This one I need half an hour to explain. I might try to compress as much as I can. Dia macam ni. Your second question, who's the largest contributor? Now, according to we have to be very careful when we ask that question. Okay, because when you say who is the largest contributor, if you look at it on an average level, then the result is at an average level lah. Tapi it may not be true to all river basins. There you can be careful. Okay, I'll give an example. If you look at the Environmental Quality Report, AQR, published by DOE, in terms of parameter, so ammonia, you mentioned ammonia just now. Ammonia loading, largest single sector is sewage treatment plant.
Yeah.
It's sewage treatment plant. As far as the EQR goes, it's sewage treatment plant. But BOD organics is sewage and pig farming. So that is at the what I call this, at the macro level. However, you have to be careful when you digest those numbers. Issues, pollution loading issues are very river basin specific. Okay, I think for example, if you go to Sungai Kim Kim, contohnya lah, takkan Sungai Kim Kim silage kot. Because Sungai Kim Kim is within the industrial zone. So in the industrial area is also a significant contributor. If you go to Sungai Balok, adjacent to an industrial zone, so industrial zone is also a significant contributor. Nampak? So just because sewage is the largest at the macro level, but at river basin level, it's very specific. And this also tallies with the point that you mentioned earlier on plantation. Okay, on plantation. if you go to a rural setting and an urban setting, the issues are different. Urban setting, as you know, the issues are mostly on organics, ammonia, BOD and whatnot. Tapi if you go to a rural setting, I mean everybody selalu cakap sungai kat Malaysia kalau teh tarik, teh tarik, teh susu. That is primarily because of erosion. And studies have shown that the largest loading contributor is actually coming from plantation. This is studies that have been done, official studies that have been done. It's coming from plantations. So that is orang kata to the fact of the matter lah. Okay, itu one side of things. Now, so it's very clear. Urban river and rural river setting, the issues are different. Okay, back to your point pasal ammonia punya loading. Okay, ammonia, when you interpret loading, you also have to be careful. You also have to be careful the way you interpret loading. I give an example. Loading is driven by two factors. One is the concentration, second is the flow. Okay, one is the concentration, second is the flow. That means how much is being released. Sorry if I'm being too technical here. Tapi, okay, let's just say, you have fertilizer, you apply dekat kawasan plantation, But the fertilizer tu, you tak letak banyak pun, you letak sikit je. You letak sikit je fertilizer tu. That means at low level lah, Tapi when it rains, hujan sangat lebat dekat satu kawasan tu, air yang keluar tu dia sangat banyak. Okay, dia sangat banyak. When you multiply the flow and the concentration, it shows as if your loading is very big. Padahal in reality your concentration tak besar pun. Your concentration kecil je, tak besar pun. You see? So that's why when you interpret loading from non-point sources, you have to be very careful. Because the flow, the rainfall intensity can be very high, then it shows the loading to be very high. Padahal maybe in terms of the parameter, dia tak, it's not a prevalent issue pun. Tapi erosion, yes lah, of course lah. Erosion, yes lah, that's a standard solid, you see. So that's why when you interpret the numbers, you have to be careful.
Okay, so I think because now we're in the ammonia conversation, there is a question here, either Ms. Norina or Dr. Zaki to take up. Ammonia is one of several forms of nitrogen that exists in aquatic environment. What is JAS's role to minimize or coordinate this activity along river basin, even the activities controlled by the local government? I think the first question is, can JAS do something about it? And if JAS can, what can be done to minimize or coordinate these activities along the river basin?
Well, as I'm saying just now, we do have the peraturan lah. Kalau ammonia, about organic nitrogens, all these things, memang kita ada from kita punya peraturan for sewage, peraturan untuk effluent perindustrian, kita ada peraturan untuk kita punya tu lah. So kalau source itu adalah di bawah, is actually under the purviews of DOE, of course enforcement come in lah, because enforcement is to see whether they comply or not, right? Because itu standard. So whether they comply A or comply to B, depend where are they, alright? Tetapi in terms of to control others punya contributions from that kinds of parameter ammonia tadi tu, they will be under the purviews of other department, okay? Other agency. They have to play the role as well, because it's not everything is under the DOE ataupun di bawah jurisdictions of DOE. Okay, cuma kita akan monitor lah, as Dr. Zaki mentioned just now. Kita hanya monitor, kita tak dapat nak see. We only can know about the category tadi. Kalau ammonium nitrogen, okay, there is from most sources. The biggest sources is from the sewage. Okay, and then for SS, of course, is actually open area. Sebab ini tiga dengan BOD. BOD actually is part of the industry or also part of the from any veterinary punya plantations, veterinary also contribute. So kita sekarang ni kita tak pasti dia adalah dekat mana. Only we can know from our inventory dekat kawasan yang mana yang ada banyak kilang, di mana kawasannya banyak plantation. So dekat situ dia nanti akan play a role in terms of to signify apa parameter actually menyebabkan kemerosotan sungai itu tadilah. So
is there a coordinated task force? Is there a coordinated task force between JAS, local government, katakan apa, water resource regulators? Is there a coordinated task force between all these agencies to control the activities along river basins?
Okay, untuk control, for example, to control in terms of the penempatan the kilang, what dia punya apa nama tu, kita ada play and role dalam apa rancangan merancang dekat PBT. We are actually part of dia punya ahli lah dalam jawatan kuasa dalam rancang tersebut. We give our input based on our punya capability lah. Kita punya dari segi kita punya peraturan, dari segi kita punya in terms of environment view, kita akan bagi the inputs. Itu satu. Yang kedua adalah dari segi EIA, projek-projek EIA. Because they also one of the contributor kepada some of the pollution ni tadi. So kita adalah sebagai orang yang kata merajuilah for EIA. However, EIA is actually for the report only. Itu melurus report. But we don't say whether it's actually the government itself, the state government is to say whether dia nak lagi ke projek itu ataupun tak nak, is dia punya kelulusan. Not DOE hanya kepada report. We look into the environment issue. We look into apa mitigation measure dia. But untuk meluluskan projek tersebut adalah masih lagi kepada apa pihak yang memberi kelulusan. Right? So itu kita punya tu. Dari segi kita punya, kalau for example yang henti tugas logi, we do have apa penguasaan bersepadu dengan luas, dengan badan kawasan sedia air. Like for example, we also have others penguasa bersama bila ops gempur, whatever ops yang kita ada, yang ini akan datang ada juga ops, because selalunya bila berlakunya pencemaran is always like when is near to the public holiday, perayaan, itu. Jadi kita akan more proaktif. So we are actually sacrifice our people untuk buat kerja tersebut, walaupun dalam bulan Ramadan ni kan kita masih lagi buat kerja pemantauan. We don't make that excuse, because itu adalah task yang kita diberikan lah. So itu tanggungjawab jabatan sekitar lah. The task that be given, we actually do our best in a matter of controlling the pollution. However, we will not able to control all, because dia ada orang lain juga yang perlu lihat bersama.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Norina. There's a couple of questions here. If you are comfortable, Dr. Zaki or Ms. Norina comfortable, can take it up. Mr. Lee, three mega factories have been approved on top of one of the other existing mega rubbish plant. I'm not sure. In Banting, to import and recycle paper and rubbish from United States of America. Industrial effluent will be discharged into Sungai Langat, which will supply raw water to Loji Air Labuan Dagangan 8 kilometers away. Why authorities permit such atrocities? I'm just putting up a cleaned up version of his comment. So why such atrocities are allowed? So I don't know, I guess there's always a balance between economic expectations as well as environmental needs. So not that I'm justifying Mr. Lee, I'm not justifying that, but I guess that's where state or federal government will balance whether the economic benefits they feel like going to supersede the environmental benefit or whatnot. But if either of you have any point on this particular question about having such industry being approved above water intake point, I guess in this case it's not just damaging the environment per se, but also risking water treatment plant getting shut down. There's always a potential risk for that.
Okay.
I guess, Mr. Lee, you know what's happening here? They are agreeing with you. It is a difficult situation. If either one of you want to comment on this.
I think what the UE can comment on this matter, because as I mentioned just now, in terms of localities, di mana penempatan kilang itu is not under the purview of DOE. However, apa yang kita lihat adalah dari segi dia punya kawalan tu. Apa kawalan yang dia buat? Okay, whether dia punya kawalan tu able to meet our punya standard. Sebab tadi kita ada sebut pasal standard. Kalau dia meet the standard, then is actually dia comply lah. Tetapi adakah ada tempat yang macam for example ada area tempat dia buat stok, kan, simpan stok, they also can contribute to that. Perkara itu kena dilihat jugalah. Cuma apa yang saya mention dekat sini adalah kebenaran itu bukan terletak di bawah apa nama tu kuasa Jabatan Alam Sekitar lah, in terms of kenapa dia berada di atas loji rawatan air. Yeah, because kalau kita lihat kawasan dekat KL ni, dekat mana that you will put? Kalau semua kawasan ini adalah kawasan yang dah dibangunkan, kan? So it's a matter whether the river enough water or not. Itu yang selalunya akan diletakkan all this loji rawatan air, di mana air itu enough, okay? Dia punya volumes, the quantity itu enough, and they will be treat that water. Cuma dia akan
just to clarify, those developments are actually downstream. Allah pun agak yang tiga tu.
Dia kata upstream tadi.
It's downstream.
Oh, okay, downstream. That is some information for you, Mr. Lee. It's downstream. But I think is there be it okay, downstream means the water supply, likely disruption water supply due to these facilities rendah, but the impact to the river is always there. I'm wondering, I mean, I want to just reframe this question because it's too specific. Does public, the citizens, have avenue to raise their concerns kepada authority in order to protect the environment? Macam dalam kes macam ni kan, does citizens have an avenue? If there is, what is that channel or which agency they should talk to? Any idea or suggestion on that?
I think for some of the activities, as Puan Norina mentioned, is subject to EIAs. And those EIAs, they have public viewing. They have public viewing, especially if it's a scheduled to EIAs. So if the public wants if the resident wants their voice heard, that is the avenue where they can do it. In fact, they even have advertisements and all that.
Okay, that's one approach, Mr. Lee. So I guess we are not the best situation that you are in, but that's one of the ways for us to address it. There's another question here. Is rising global sea level a threat in terms of saltwater intrusion to our rivers? Do we foresee this in terms of planning and execution? I think it's already a problem, but leave it to Ms. Norina to respond to this and Dr. Zaki.
Ms. Monita, can I just mention about what back to your question just now? What is the platform for them please. To actually? Kita memang ada satu talian untuk aduan. Kita ada aduan about environment punya aduan. Kita ada 1-800-882-727, itu toll free, so that you can operating for 24 hours. Alright, or you can email kepada aduan_k@doe.gov.my or kepada portal e-aduan JAS. I think that's one dalam website JAS memang ada. So you can actually use that platform to actually raise up your punya aduan berkenaan dengan environment.
Okay, Ms. Norina, can you repeat again? Can you repeat again the email address?
Aduan, ADUAN _ K for Kelang,
K Kelang, okay.
At doe.gov.my.
At doe.gov.my. So I have put it up on the Facebook punya comment. So please get in there, or the e-portal in Jabatan Alam Sekitar punya website. That is pretty easy to get. You just have to go into their website and you can see the e-portal punya button. So please also raise your concerns there, or things that you want. Contohnya you want to look at certain EIA, or you want to participate in DOE punya programs or events, so that you are more well informed, please do that. While we're having these conversations, we also have put up some polls, so please respond to the poll. For those in Zoom, kepada Facebook, cannot see this poll lah, so minta maaf. Okay, back to the question. Is rising global sea level a threat in terms of saltwater intrusion to our rivers? Do we foresee this in terms of planning and execution?
Yes. The long and short of it, yes. I think one of the more well-known cases in Malaysia is the case of Sungai Muar in Johor, where it is said because of the rising climate change, rising sea levels, the tidal intrusion in Sungai Muar has gone further upstream. And the consequence of this is that some of the water intake points on Sungai Muar can no longer are not, is it no longer, they are at risk. They are at risk. So as a consequence of that, I've been informed that there are efforts underway to construct a barrage on Sungai Muar to prevent the saltwater intrusion. So that's the most prevalent case, because water intake points, as you know, they need fresh water. You know, they can't treat brackish water. They can't treat brackish water.
I think that one in Sarawak River, they already put a long time ago, actually, because of the intrusions of water from the Sungai Sarawak, because there is intact that has been, I mean, but at that time, people not actually talking about climate change, but now it's the climate change.
Yeah.
So, but actually is already done there, the barrage in Sarawak River. So that is actually to stop those water from the sea to go and affecting the water intake. Because when I was there, actually we drink some kinds of funny things for the water. So I still remember that. That's why I can link that to for the barrage. Yeah.
Okay.
There's things that they stop the water from going more more further up to the river. Yeah.
But look like it's already gone to the point of physical interference, right? Because if it's not like within control of replanning the entire area to stop that flow, I don't think that can happen. This is sort of like stuck with the rising of the sea level and whatnot. So I think dah tak banyak benda kita boleh buat. So I would like to pursue further to Ms. Norina. Understanding the roles and responsibility in managing environment are shared between many agencies, but in public's view, JAS is the lead protector of the environment. I mean, kita tahu, like just now you also mentioned about Jabatan Veterina terlibat, local government without a doubt, state government, SPAN, Badan Kawal Selia, I for every respective states. But the thing is, when any incident happens, JAS is actually pointed out as expected to become the protector. So in this case, when it comes to issues related to water resources, is JAS planning to take the stewardship position to sort of like to get things in order, to get everyone in order, to get everyone to behave in certain way, so environment is protected. Is there any plans for JAS to take up this role? After all, people dah bagi mandate.
People give mandate, but kita masih ada kekangan. Our punya, with our main powers kita. Kalau saya beri kita tahu kan, memang kalau we give how to say, kita diberi tanggungjawab, but diberi semua resource, of course we will be able to do that. I think it's much easy if there is like one entity that actually controlling everything, right? Rather than part and parcel of it. But that is my personal view. It's not my department view. Okay, this is my personal view. However, kita balik kepada the first earlier openings of my remark just now about, well, actually looking after the environment is not DOE, is not the government agency, is not the expert like Dr. Zaki, but it's actually everybody's punya responsibility. It's everybody, because we are the user and we have to protect what is actually benefit to us lah. Itu yang kita di dalam kita punya DOE punya motto pun kita kata environment, our share responsibility. So dia tak boleh melepaskan sahaja kepada pihak lain untuk membuat dia, and then kita sebagai user kita just know how to make a comments, okay, say about this. Saya nak bagi tadi yang saya mentions about why I said that we not able to become a lead as a environmental protector. Kalau lihat kepada kita punya manpower kita untuk technical people in the whole of Malaysia is only 1,400 people. But our punya punca di bawah kita, punca yang saya masukkan is only the industry, belum lagi yang EIA, belum lagi yang yang others yang kerja-kerja di jawatan. We have 55,631 punca hilang inventory. Paling besar is di Selangor, Johor, Penang. So ini yang paling besar lah resource. 1,400, then you can divide. Berapa kali satu tahun round pun 365, you're not able to actually look into the whole of the industry. Belum lagi kita yang ada kerja kita punya function lain lah. Contohnya kita punya pengeluaran lesen, monitoring tadi, I can mention tadi kan. And then selain daripada punca tetap, kita ada punca bergerak on the untuk memastikan kenderaan tidak mengeluarkan asap hitam. Itu juga kita punya kerja-kerja. So itu kekangan yang kita ada lah. Kekangan yang kita ada untuk to become a lead as an environment protector. Memang kita tak mampu buat itu sekarang. Tapi mungkin kalau itu adalah dikatakan kita diberi mandat, but we have to be given a resource. Kalau itu kita boleh buat, is much better lah. But apa yang effort sekarang, we cannot say we cannot do it, we don't do it. Sekarang we have to do it in all ability that we can. Itu yang just nak emphasize lah, because kita nampak sekarang ni kan we are considered unsung hero lah. Sebab always people don't appreciate what we do, tapi kita akan sentiasa dikecam, sentiasa dimarahi lah. So but it's a challenge for us, but we do with our punya kemampuan yang kita ada lah on this thing. So just memang akan terus menjalankan peranan dan tanggungjawab di dalam menjaga alam sekitar mengikut mandat kuasa yang diberikan di bawah Akta Kualiti Alam Sekitar 1974. Itu
Ms. Ernest, you are sharing all this, and at the right time, someone have prompted a message here. Since there's a lack of enforcement manpower, do you think it's time to engage local consumer organizations, schools, resident association to monitor the river near them as hero? We want to help. I think that's really nice.
That's good. That's good actually. Itu adalah salah satu daripada, that's why kita ada RAS. Rakyat Alam Sekitar, which whoever that want to be enrolled, dia punya the first program itu di launch dulu adalah untuk menjadi mata dan telinga JAS.
Yes.
Alright, itu dia punya the main kita, objektif kita ada Rakyat Alam Sekitar ni dulu. Sebab kita nak public to actually to become our punya mata dan telinga, to tell us. Tetapi banyak yang macam they don't want to, because when bagi information tu mereka rasa takut lah. Tapi itu kenyataan dia lah, dia takut. Tapi another program yang kita katakan selain daripada sebagai mata dan telinga, kita sekarang ni ada program yang di bawah payung denai sungai. Because we want to bring the community back to the river. Itu another initiative yang kita bersama di bawah KASA, kita bersama untuk membawa community to come to the river and to know them. Because I remember when I was still small, dulu saya balik kampung, saya orang kampung kan, we are actually, orang kampung dia akan protect the river because they know the river is good for them. River is the source of dia punya, they fishing there, dia punya livelihood is there. They also using the water for water supply, untuk dia punya water supply for drinking, for washing, for mandi, all these things. So dia akan, satu community tu akan go to the river at one time, they will clean the river. So itu yang kita nak bawa konsep tu. Tetapi it is actually, sekarang ni kita nampak dekat bandar lah, kalau the suburb is easier. But dekat bandar, so everybody will be busy. Itu yang kita nak promotekan kepada community to actually involve with these kinds of aktiviti, bukan saja dengan JAS, tapi mungkin ada NGO lain yang akan membuat that kinds of program yang bagus. So kita kena ambil inisiatif lah untuk participate in that.
Okay, so I just want to pick up another question here. It may not be directly, maybe in a way, I want to see, what about integrating river management system, coastal zone management system, and that's from Halari, and James actually asking, are we failing to integrate our water resources management? So I think all these things are similar context. These questions are being posed, framing, integrating the entire fresh water, I guess, as well as marine side to be lumped up and integrated. Is this a possibility? If it's a possibility, will it even help by integrating the whole thing? Does it help by putting all together and synchronizing the objective, as what Halari Nyambar have said? What do you all think? Dr. Zaki, if you can.
Yes, actually, we've been talking about integrated river basin management for very long time already, longest time. But whether we really come to realize IBM or not, I'm not too sure about that. But having said that, I do think that is the way to go lah. I do think it's the way to go, because as per our discussion today, it's very clear that not everything is under DOE. Even in terms of pollution sources, in terms of what you call these resources and whatnot, jurisdiction, many parties are involved. When you talk about river basin management, when you talk about catchment management, the issue is, what is the mechanism? How do you establish that mechanism for effective RVM? To me, again, this goes back down to what I mentioned earlier. Water is a state purview. So that's why nowadays you see there are state water authorities being set up. I believe it is in line with the concept of RVM lah. For example, in Selangor, we have Luas. In Kedah, you have Elsang, Lembaga Sumber in Kedah. And the latest one earlier this year is in Terengganu, Laut, L-A-U-T, Laut. The idea is to have an umbrella agency at the state level that functions to manage water resources in an integrated manner, but not just involving state agencies, but federal agencies as well. So I think that is the mechanism. I think I applaud this mechanism that the state governments are doing. At the same time, also, even in recent weeks, you heard the idea of having the Muda Management Authority, just specifically for Sungai Muda, specifically for Sungai Muda. So that's another initiative to have a more cohesive, integrated river basin management. Only that, to me, yeah, sure, that is the mechanism. But for me, for it to be truly effective, you must have clear and measurable targets and goals. And I keep talking about this. And these targets and goals must be assigned to the various stakeholders, agencies involved. That means measurable targets. I take, for example, I keep talking about, I give an example like the River of Life. ROL is a great example, where you have a spearheading agency, which is DID, spearheading the ROL initiative. And under that ROL committee, you have all the other agencies who are in charge of their own respective responsibilities in terms of ROL, achieving the ROL targets. So they have their own responsibilities. And then what you need to do is you need to assign those responsibilities and measure the progress and effectiveness of each agency. And then from there you can send them, and then it'll be meaningful.
I think there's a couple of questions in the Facebook. Some comments have been put up. We will not be able to take up everything today. So if both of you will will kindly have some time tomorrow or later today. If you can respond to that, it'd be fantastic. And I think some of them actually would like to engage with both of you or either one of you to, they're coming from an activist role, you know, to protect the river. So I think that is that would be an amazing engagement if that can actually happen. So I do hope that if you have the time and you are interested with this conversation, you can actually respond to them in the comments under the Facebook section. So I have a last question for each of you. First one is to Dr. Zaki. How prepared is Malaysia to address all these challenges that you have actually said, and you also have given some suggestion, but how prepared is Malaysia to address these challenges? And in your view, if there's one thing that can be done today to have the biggest positive impact, what would you say that would be? Besides helping the activists who are asking for help. Besides that.
I think based on our discussion today, it is very clear that there are many things that needs improving on. So going on that basis, we've already discussed just now, even compliance to current legislative limit in the law doesn't necessarily mean the river will not become polluted, because there's the issue of carrying capacity and loading. That is meeting the legislation, no joke. Itu belum campur yang not in the legislation. Itu yang in the legislation. So if you go on that basis, then it's very obvious that there are things that we need to improve on. We need to improve on. So we are not entirely ready yet. We are not ready unless we start looking in that direction. So further to that, and what is the single thing that we can improve based on the current structure? Again, I always comment based on the current structure of things. If the structure changes, besok lusa I tak tahu. Based on the current structure of things, we need to assign the targets and the KPIs and the goals that I mentioned earlier. Because right now everybody is talking about, we want to control pollution, we want to make the water quality better, we want to make sure the river doesn't become polluted, we want to preserve. Okay, good. But what do you mean by preserve? How do you measure preservation? Do you want it to be class 1? Do you want it to be class 2? There must be tangible. That's what I mentioned just now. DOE measure. DOE report. DOE does that. Tapi DOE doesn't set the target. Okay, kita nak sungai ni kelas 2. DOE cannot do that. That's not within their provision. That is under state government. Kita nak sungai ni kelas 1. Kita nak sungai ni kelas 2. DOE can only measure. So who does that? So that is what we need to do. We need to assign these tangible, measurable targets and goals, if you ask me. And then the mechanism comes. The mechanism of implementation comes.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zaki. And Ms. Norina, for the listeners who have patiently waited until this point of this hour on a fasting month, what are the plans in pipeline, hot in the oven, that DOE is having right now in order to address the deterioration of our water resources, the quality of our water resources? Is there something fresh in the oven that you'd like to share with us? Hot like roti boy category.
I don't think there is a really considered as hot in the oven, because we are continue to do the things. So it's actually keep on baking and put in the oven, come out. It's not really the first batch, all right? So what is at the pipeline? Sekarang ni memang DOE actually looking into a smart enforcement. Because tadi I mentioned with 1,400 people, we're not able to actually do that. So we actually, bring in the other agencies together untuk buat enforcement, that called smart enforcement. Besides that, tools, kita perlu ada tools. Tadi kita kata about the continuous stations, mungkin menambah baikkan, memperbanyakkan lagi. Itu adalah salah satu daripada perancangan kita lah, memperbanyakkan lagi yang can able to give us the almost real time punya data. Itu mungkin another one tadi, untuk memperkasakan lagi kita punya program pengawasan kualiti alam sekitar. And then another one that I do not know, it's not fresh yet, it's still masih lagi dalam baking, but it actually almost back. I think adalah pindaan kepada denda. Denda yang kita ada yang dalam akta itu adalah salah satu yang kita kata to more meninggikan lagi the denda, meningkatkan lagi the denda and a compound. So it can be like apa nama tu, just this is actually to membuatkan pesalah itu takutlah. Tetapi whether that will be effective, we will see later. And then yang in the progress yang kita nak buat adalah penggubalan akta, formulating the new akta quality unskilling to actually put tadi macam yang Dr. Zaki talking about the TMDL in other part of the world, they already put that is in their law. So kita belum ada lagi benda tu. So kita nak masukkan di dalam, maybe itu adalah salah satu daripada yang kita nak masukkan dalam itulah. Salah satu lagi ialah kita nak how to say promoting the TMDL tadi, because itu adalah salah satu konsep yang kita kata tadi yang someone have been asking whether be integrated. Itulah adalah satu tool yang mungkin kita kata can be used to actually ada target. Kita ada target dekat situ when we actually know what is the carrying capacity of the river. So they will put the target, tapi who's going to put the target is actually who's on the river, is a state government. Dia punya resource. So dia yang akan memainkan peranan sebagai penyelaras kepada semua peranan kepada agensi-agensi lain to actually look into their own activities under their purview. So itu yang kita kata to integratekan all the agency di bawah satu penyelarasan lah. Tapi kita perlu ada target lah. We cannot do thing without any target. So selain daripada itu, I think of course as I mentioned tadi, kita memang all are on the same path lah. The communication, educations, awareness on the environment. Salah satu yang kita put is yang kita jalankan adalah pada tadi dah yang bring the committee into the untuk denai sungai punya, di bawah denai sungai. So kita kita brandkan dia di bawah denai sungai, tetapi kita kata ras cakna sungai. So it's mean like we are actually bring up the ras, ahli ras. So siapa yang belum ada jadi ahli ras, jadilah ahli ras supaya dia boleh dibawa dalam program ini. Tetapi kalau tak jadi ahli ras pun boleh juga, tak ada masalah untuk bersama dengan DOE. Tetapi it's just that the information may not be able to reach to them because kita akan menyampaikan melalui platform RISE. Cuma sekarang ni disebabkan kekangan oleh COVID-19 tu, kita tak boleh membawa ramai orang. So it's just that a very small group lah yang kita boleh buat untuk program denai sungai lah. So lain-lain tu actually everybody also know yang kita ada macam e-waste punya program. Even though e-waste is nothing to do with the river, but it's actually before people akan dump dia punya peti sejuk dalam river, dia punya TV in the river, the washing machine in the river. You can find anything in the river, everything is in the river. So perkara itu yang kita kata e-waste, household e-waste punya program, actually to promote that kinds of program so that people will not able to dump it in other places rather, and it's also is dia hazardous. So wherever you dump, you have to be properly. So itu adalah antara apa yang saya katakan tadi is apa yang kita telah buat. So every time kita ada buat aktiviti, kita akan wawarkan to show that DOE is actually doing dia punya kerja. They are actually serve the public, serve the nations. Itu yang saya nak sampaikan lah untuk hari ini berkenaan dengan apa. So that's why I'm saying to you, Ms. Purita, that I don't know whether it's fresh from the oven or actually it's continue baking.
It's okay. I think the good part about all these things that you shared is people who do not know, who are not aware of all these initiatives that we put in place. At least now there's an opportunity for them to find out. Like you have talked about trust, you talked about e-waste. Earlier you talked about the portal, changing in the increasing penalty, changes into the act itself, building in TMDL. That is a lot of things going on. So to those who have actually posed questions and we're unable to pick up, my apologies. Some of the questions are related to previous conversations that we had in relation to water disruption. So the program is themed around water disruption, but we have moved on directly from water disruption to the sources component of it. So feel free to check the previous videos. And other relevant comments that has been put in place. I hope the panelists, kalau sempat, if you can respond to them on our Facebook chat. But Forum IA and myself also will respond to some of your comments and maybe guide you to go to the right direction, especially questions where some of them said that we want to be involved and participate. I think RAS is a good opportunity, Rakan Alam Sekitar. And share it. Please share this news. Please be the eyes, ears, and the mouthpiece for DOE, because when you do that, it's not for DOE, it's for the environment. So I would like to thank both panelists for spending your time with us today. And I would like to thank all the participants in Facebook as well as Zoom call. Thank you very much for staying with us until almost 10 o'clock at night. And I would like to end the session. Selamat malam, and don't forget, manusia adalah khalifah alam. So have a good night. Thank you, everyone. See you in 2 weeks with our next program.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.